Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the Legendarium podcast. This is episode number 300 and something or other. Today, we are finally getting back to the Obelisk Gate. This is book 2 in the Broken Earth trilogy by N.K. Jemesin. It has been months since we read book 1. If you're listening to this 3 years or 5 years or, 85 years in the future, then you don't notice the jump, but it's there. And I mention it partly to apologize for those who have waited so long, and partly as an explanation for why we will have forgotten everything about book 1 in this discussion. So anyway, I am Craig Hanks, your host, and over there, well, he's dumber than a bag of rocks and a lot less useful to a jawless stone eater. It's Ryan Bruckman.
Gonna let it slide. Had a good one, but it's really bad, so gonna let it go.
Yeah, you're gonna let it slide because you don't remember what that refers to, right?
No, a totally different reason. Moving on.
All right. Well, and I feel confident, honestly, that if I got kidnapped, she would either go to the ends of the earth to find me and rescue me, or find a nice cushy spot to set up somewhere on the way to the ends of the earth, and just kind of not worry about me anymore. It's my lovely and talented wife, Sara Hanks.
Thank you for having me. And I would absolutely do one of those two things.
That's fair enough. All right. So like I said, we're going to be talking about the Obelisk Gate. Before we get there, just a little bit of housekeeping. Remember, go to thelegendarium.com, and that's where you're going to find links to all sorts of stuff. Patreon, you can go straight to patreon.com/legendarium, or you can find the link on our website. You can also go to our Discord server and join in the conversation there. We love having all the discussion. We are getting close, Ryan, to 1,000 members on Discord.
Wow.
Yeah, it's and it's crazy how many of these people are active. I know there's a lot of lurkers, and you are welcome also. I hope you enjoy watching the conversations. But yeah, it's a wonderful Discord.
When we cross that threshold, do we start getting, it's like AARP, do we start getting cult status things where, we get email magazines, things like that from cults?
Cults?
Yeah.
Why? I've never...
Never mind. I just don't look at my search history. We're fine.
If you're talking about cults, we do need more information. Cults, so hot right now.
Oh, it's the in thing right now.
Are you watching all these cult documentaries? You know what? Let's leave that alone. Yeah, lots of cult documentaries. Some of them are good. Go watch them. Anyway, I can't think of anything else. So thelegendarium.com, just go there and check it out. Okay, so let's talk about the Obelisk Gate. Again, this is book 2 in the Broken Earth trilogy. This book won the Hugo for Best Novel in 2017, the second of her 3 in a row, right? All 3 of these books won a Hugo, part of why we're talking about them. And I don't know, maybe we'll get to the question of whether it deserved a Hugo. But if we do, personally, I refuse to answer that question because I have no idea.
And why'd you bring it up? So
that you could answer it. As the resident non-fantasy person, I figured you could tell us.
That makes no sense. Of course, I have no idea. I don't know what is there a Hugo that the Hugo Award was named for?
Hugo Weaving and his performance in Lord of the Rings.
It's actually French. It's Hugeau. The Hugo.
It's from the Huguenots.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So see, clearly, I didn't know that. I don't know how I could be any sort of expert on whether this book earned the Hugo Award.
No, and I have no idea who the nominees were, and frankly, I don't know. The Hugos. It's not that they. My saying that I don't care doesn't mean that I don't think they should exist and that they're not important. Anything like that. It's just I don't care. Mm-hmm. And it's like the Oscars. I don't care.
Yeah.
I don't know, Ryan. Am I being unfair to the Hugos here?
No, because I feel very similarly about
okay, good. All right.
I appreciate the sticker on the front of the book. It tells me that people have appreciated this book.
Somebody liked it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Exactly. Well, do you guys want a recap of book 2 here?
Yes, please.
Okay, because it's been a while since you read it. I know both of you read it kind of like I was the holdup here. So I was the one who was, had the brakes on unintentionally. Just life happened. But anyway, I distilled this book down for you. Normally, I give you a 3-paragraph, summary of the book. Today, I did it in 1.
Efficient.
Okay.
Yeah, very efficient. Are you ready? The Obelisk Gate opens with Essen in Castrima and ends with Essen in Kostrima. We also get a new point of view in Nasun, who travels with her murderous father and eventually ends up in the care of Schaffa, the guardian who took in a young Essen at the beginning of book 1. Turns out Nasun is pretty magical as well. This is a book in which not much really happens, but a lot of questions are answered and even more are set up for book 3. So wait for book 3, right? That's my summary.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think there are some things that happen in the book.
Yeah.
There is a few things about another calm coming to attack and forcing them to, like, we will let you live, but you have to get rid of all of your origins. There's the whole story of Schaffa and his memory loss. And so there's a few other things that happen in this book other than just Kostrima. But understandably, yes, we spend most of our time living in a geode in this story.
Yeah. And, So I did a little bit of reading around, as far as what other people thought of the book when it came out, so reading reviews on various websites. And for the most part, the reviews were positive, and I would say for good reason. But there was one review in particular where the guy was just like, nothing happens. I can't remember. It was like in Wired or something. I can't remember which site it was on, but he's nothing happens. This is total middle book syndrome. And I get that also. I mean, I'm being flippant in my summary, but not a lot happens in this book as far as events. But that doesn't mean it's not interesting and exciting, right?
Yeah, it's a lot of this book, I feel, she decided in this one, it does suffer from middle book syndrome a little bit, but she decided to tackle deep topics in this one with a little more time than maybe she did in the first one, where it was still trying to establish the world and trying to get things going.
So do you have an example?
She consistently deals with the way that second-class citizens are treated in this world, or third class, or whatever, the origins specifically. But a huge part of the time at Kostrima is the constant battle between those who, the stills and the origins, and they have managed to work out a society where they can live together. And it's worked out, like it's working out. And we kind of had a previous version of that on the island in the first book. If you remember that, the pirate island.
Yeah. Sure.
We've come into these different societies where they're, in different ways, they have figured out how to make the issues of who someone is work. But each one of them has fallen apart at some point when a certain aspect has been introduced. And in this book, she goes like, okay, what happens when we put an enemy on your doorstep that says you can live, but they have to go? You guys decide. And then the group decides to have a democracy about it. Like, at least for a little while. Like, it's a really difficult and deep piece to get into.
Right. Yeah, there, I suspect, and I know I'm going way, way out on a limb here, but I suspect that N.K. Jemesin and I would have a lot to disagree about politically, right? And
Yes.
that's totally fine. I would actually love to have dinner with her and just, hash things out. I think that would be a lot of fun. She seems very interesting. But one thing that she and I think, can agree on is that democracy ain't everything that a lot of people, think it's cracked up to be. So it's not the end all be all. There's that great scene. So the scene you're talking about, the scene I'm talking about, is at the end, like you said, the stills can live, you can come with us and live in our calm, but the origins have got to go. So, kill them or get rid of them or whatever, or we'll kill them. And so there's this big vote scheduled, and it's like the town council basically is going to get together and decide what to do about this issue. And it's chapters and chapters long where we're getting up to this vote. What are they going to decide? What's going to happen at this town council vote? And finally, we get to the morning of, and all this stuff has happened. I'm being flippant. Things happen in this book, right? Stuff has happened up to then. And the morning of the vote, Essen, or is that what she's going by these days? Essen? Yeah. Essen goes to the town council meeting and bursts in, and it was like, no vote. This ain't happening.
She destroys the ballot box.
That's right. Yeah, she destroys the ballot box. She has killed somebody, in a fit of memory rage about her son, and essentially what she comes in and says is that the issue of who is a person and who who counts in this community is not up for a vote.
Yeah.
And that really resonated with me. I thought that was really good. There are some issues that are beyond majoritarianism, right? And so that's a moment that I really liked and appreciated. I don't know. What about you, Sarah? Thoughts, feelings?
About that scene in particular?
Yeah. Let's stick with that one for a little while.
Yeah. I mean, I thought it was a really helpful kind of illustration of taking something that you might think is just a good, like democracy, like let's put it to a vote.
Right.
There's not one person making this decision, from on high. So supposedly that's better. And just kind of saying, well, but what is the material consequence of saying, no, you get to vote on whether these adults and children and your community members will die? Like what is the consequence of empowering a group of people to decide whether other people can live? I thought it worked really well, and it definitely felt like the build up to it was kind of long, but
like I said, chapters and chapters. Yeah, for sure.
But no, I appreciated that was folded into the story.
Yeah, I think we have a tendency certainly in America, and I think in Western societies generally, to kind of fetishize democracy. Like, it's, but this is what the people want. And it's like, on some issues, I don't care what the people want.
Right.
And you shouldn't care what the people want. Right. So it's a thornier issue than it's maybe being laid out as in this book. It's pretty simple. Am I a person? You don't get to vote on that.
Yeah, exactly. Like the question of what are the things that are beyond majority vote,
that's thorny.
Exactly. Yeah. There's going to be a lot of disagreement on that.
Yeah.
And that's the thing is with Jemesin, though, she's very clearly tied a lot of personal experience, a lot of the race issues into her stories with this. And that is very much a portion of that history and that story. And it's definitely a ground that we get hesitant to tread on from not being able to speak to it well. But watching the perspective of saying, my being human is not up for a debate, when it ties into real world things, like literally at one point in time, people having a percentage assigned to them, like, or a fraction, 3/5 of a person type thing, like having to vote on moments like that, it
feels icky. It
does. And I appreciate that she's not shying away from moments like that in these stories, because if you allow it to, it gives you a moment to think and reflect and say, okay, has there ever been a moment like this in reality that I should be aware of? And sadly, yeah, there's a few of them, but I don't know. It's something we don't tend to spend a lot of time on.
Yeah. And that's, that's why a book like this is valuable. I doubt that I even picked up on a lot of the stuff that she was throwing in, as far as the racial themes or whatever you might have. I'm sure a lot of them just go over my head based on who I am. But it's an opportunity to consider those issues, right? Even if, like I said, she and I would disagree on a lot of things, it's still valuable to bring it up and think about it. So,
and it's a way for an author. It's something that I've come to appreciate a lot more lately, is authors and artists who take the time to tell a story like this or to add those elements from their own personal perspective gives you a chance to better understand where they're coming from. And sometimes it feels like, sometimes those moments feel ham-fisted or heavy-handed or anything like that. It's natural a lot of times for that to feel that way. But that's, if you allow yourself the time to actually empathize and say, like, okay, this is coming from your perspective and your experience. How can I better understand that? Art is an incredible way. Literature, this is a great way to allow yourself into that world.
Sure.
And so I've come to appreciate it more, especially as of late. And with N.K. Jemesin being an author who's really stood out to me for that.
Well, and let's shift gears a little bit and stick with that scene, but go to something that Sara mentioned, which was, there's a lot of build up to this, right? Did it, for you, Sara, was it disappointing to have so much build up to the vote. What's the vote going to be? You know, how's everybody going to vote? No vote. You know, how did you feel about that? Did you feel like it was just not enough payoff, or was it okay?
It didn't feel disappointing to me. No, I think because something still happened at the critical juncture.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it might not have been a vote, but there was like a dramatic, climactic showdown kind of a thing. And given that Essen is like our protagonist, or one of two in this novel, like I was glad to see that moment where she could really like shine. You know, I didn't mind it at all that the vote didn't actually take place.
Yeah, I'm with you. As long as something happens.
Mm-hmm.
It might have been weird if it was like, we're going to have a vote, and then 2 hours before the vote, the army attacks, and then you just like completely abandon it. But there was a confrontation.
Yeah,
so they
still got to that point, and there was an unexpected turn of events. But yeah, it wasn't circumvented by like, vote canceled for unrelated reasons. Something still took place.
Cool. Well, Sara, you came armed with a notebook, and I've got it's a deadly weapon. I've got a bunch of questions and comments from Discord, but I wanted to give you a chance if you had anything that you wanted to bring up before we get to listener comments.
Well, TBH, my notebook is a list of names and who they are. So because one of the biggest barriers to entry for me.
Which is tough, yeah.
Yeah, with fantasy and with, a book that I read it a few months ago and all that is being like, now, remind me, is that the name of a city or
a disease?
A disease of some kind? Is that the bug? But I do have on my phone just a list of some things that stood out to me. I'm trying to see. It was interesting to me how, in this book we have Essen and we have, how did they pronounce it in the audiobook?
Nasen.
Okay. Her daughter, who also in origin, abducted by her father. He's trying to make her not an origin anymore. He's heard that there are these people who can do that. And I deeply loved having Nasen as part of this story and getting so much time with her, so much time from her perspective. My favorite parts of the book, for sure. And I felt like Nasen being a child was a very useful, I felt like Jemesin used that fact to kind of express some of the naive and innocent, that's kind of like both of those things in one, the naive and innocent ideas that people have about prejudice or about how the world works, but they were so earnest and so sincere. She at one point she's talking to, let me consult my notebook. Schaffa,
only one of the main characters.
Good old Schaffa. I always want to say Jaffa, and I don't know if that comes from somewhere else.
No, you're thinking of Joff Woo.
Oh, I very well could be.
No, sorry.
I am.
Right, yeah, exactly. I was just going to say, Ryan is always thinking of Joff Woo.
How could we not be?
He haunts me in the night.
Oh, no. Okay, sorry, go on.
But she's talking to Schaffa, and Schaffa is sharing with her kind of his past life as a guardian and how he would hurt kids like her, in order to teach them, in order to kind of break them. And she kind of says, even you would have done that to me, or she says something like, even me. And Schaffa kind of says, yeah, even you. And then in the following paragraphs, it says something about how Nasun told herself that even if he did those horrible things, he didn't mean them. And even if he had done that horrible thing to her, he wouldn't have meant it. It's that idea of but his heart wouldn't, he wouldn't want to hurt me, even if he did hurt me. And that's so recognizable, I think, whether we're talking about somebody, a situation where you are on the receiving end of hurt, or you're just talking about big, terrible things that are happening in other places. we tend to want to make the actions less bad by saying, but like they were such good people, or their heart was in the right place or whatever, you know? So that was just one example. I appreciated that real openness that we got from this child protagonist, I guess. That stood out to me.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. There's the moment when she kind of gives up on her father as her father, and we're going to talk about that. Actually, you know what? No, let's just talk about it right now, because it kind of gets to your point of the childlike view that she has, because she's what, 11? I think she turns 11 while they're on the road, something like that. And it's a brilliant age to pick, because you still, at that age, you still have that childlike quality, but you also are starting to understand just a little bit about things beyond literally yourself, right? And so it's a brilliant age. And you're starting to be
a little bit introspective. You're starting to notice and observe your own feelings.
Right. So anyway, they're on the road. She and Jija. Now I'm the one who's like,
dad.
That's one of the main characters, whatever. Jija, they're on the road, and he's very threatening several times, especially as they start their journey and then as they end their journey together. But he's been very threatening, physically threatening a few times, and then this moment comes up, and this is from Kiptan, who says, "This quote always breaks my heart. Daddy," she says again, this time putting more of a needy whine into her voice. "It is the thing that has swayed him, these times when he has come near to turning on her, remembering that she is his little girl, reminding him that he has been, up to today, a good father. It is manipulation. Something of her is warped out of true by this moment, and from now on, all her acts of affection toward her father will be calculated, performative. Her childhood dies for all intents and purposes, but that is better than all of her dying, she knows." And like Kiptan says, youch. And that's one of, I think, Jemesin's strengths, is those little personal moments that she delivers, like a knife to the gut.
Yeah.
It's really, really tough to read. But Kiptan's question with that quote was, how do you feel about what it says about the coping mechanisms of abused children? And this is something that I do not have firsthand experience with. I lived a very normal, happy, abuse-free childhood, except for the time my mom swatted me with a piano book because I cried when I was practicing the piano. Shut up. Other than that, I'm good. No, but it felt real to me, I guess. Yeah. I don't have the perspective, but it felt real. What about you, Ryan?
This is, all of Nasun's story is really, really hard, especially dealing with the abuse. We've already knew that Jija was abusive. We learned in book 1 from the perspective of Esun about this sort of relationship that he beat his son to death. And so we already have him as bad guy. So to take the time in this book to run it through the lens of the child and make him into a kind of good guy for a little, like a bad good guy, good bad guy.
Well, it's kind of the idea of like
his heart was in the right place.
Yeah. He killed his son, but he didn't mean it, or that could be something that she would tell herself in order to help her feel more safe, because this is still her dad and he's still in charge of protecting her.
Yeah, absolutely. It's I think that's a big part of the heartbreak, is that we can see as adults being able to fully process. But if you've ever interacted with a child coming from an abusive situation, it is absolutely incredible what their cognitive ability is to shape the world around them into what they need it to be to keep going. And it's both heartbreaking and amazing. And then knowing what they're going to have to go through to heal. Nasun, especially in this, when she makes the decision and has to leave Jija forever and kill him off, basically, what is she going to do going forward? Well, the first thing she does is she replaces her father figure.
Right.
She's like, I can't go without a father figure. It's got to be Schaffa.
Which is 1,000% normal. Yeah. Right. Nobody in the world wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
So Sorry, were you going to say something else?
No, go ahead, continue. I just think that is where it's interesting.
Yeah, no, again, it kind of gets back to what I was saying earlier about this being a brilliant age for her to pick for Nasun, because, an 11-year-old isn't going to write the paragraph the way that N.K. Jemesin did, but an 11-year-old can come to those thoughts and those conclusions, even to the idea of some internal monologue saying, my childhood is gone, where you could see it in somebody who, a child whose father leaves or whose mother dies or whatever, and they just know innately, I've got to grow up. I'm done. Like, I don't have anybody else to take care of me. I'm on my own, so even if it's not in the amazing prose that we get here, I still see that as possible.
Yeah.
From her perspective, right?
I think she also there's another aspect to her story that really jumped out to me, that it is part of the abuse, but it's not the way that a lot of people in the past have viewed abuse. And it's the fact that Jija allows her to live and does all the things he does because he believes that she can be cured of being an origin.
Yeah.
And literally says, I'm going to take you to a place where they can teach you to not be an origin. And how many children have been through that experience, especially for in reality here, like LGBTQ families, things like that, where it's don't be who you are.
Right.
I think that, again, Jemesin reaching into the stories and the hearts of a lot of people who have dealt with being ostracized for what they feel, what we feel is who they are.
Some innate quality.
There's a lot of common ground in this story. She focuses a lot on saying who gets to decide who is human and who gets to decide who I am and why is who I am not enough. It's a constant theme through the whole series, but especially in this book we've already talked about the vote, but with Nasun's story especially, she has to come to a point where she says, I am who I am, and if you can't accept that, in this case, you're going to die.
Is that all?
But yeah, it's a really dark place. And again, I think the age, like you're saying, this is a really good age to it. This is about the right age where that conflict starts to have severe problem. It causes severe problems with child when they're being constantly told, you are not what you say you are.
Or should not be what you in fact are. Yeah.
Right.
So I wonder if we're getting toward the twin questions, maybe there are more, but I'm hearing two really consistent questions. It's who deserves life and who deserves love. And the answer is everybody. But unfortunately, reality is that not everybody gets these things, even if they deserve it.
You knock a few of the levels out of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and all of a sudden that love and everything that we all need is no longer as attainable because you're still working on steps 1 and 2, the survival pieces like that. And that's kind of what she's done is she's knocked a few of those steps out by putting a world where there is no more security there is no safety on that. So how do you still attain those higher level goals, needs, when these other 3 steps have been knocked out from under you?
Right. Sarah, do you have any thoughts on this before we move on?
Yeah, I do. So I don't know if you two would agree or if I possibly read over something or forgot something, but one thing that stood out to me is that Nasun, at least as I understand the plot of the book, is not an abused child, as we tend to think of that. She's not somebody who has grown up being hit, being belittled. She's been very, she and her dad have had like a really close relationship, and not that he hasn't been harsh, but it sounds like in a way that is accepted and expected in their world, and so this turn where suddenly she is at odds with her father and her father has like an urge to kill her, that's new. And so I wonder how much of her ability, I wish I knew more about child development or how common it is for abused children to have a moment when they say like, you're no longer my parent and I'm not going to regard you that way. I think it would be much harder to do that if you've been abused from the time you're very, very young, as opposed to having such a clear contrast. Yesterday, my dad loved me completely. Today, I'm afraid of him. I wonder if that switch is what allows a person to say, like, this is not okay. I'm not okay with you treating me this way. I am going to be strategic in my interactions with you. I'm not going to seek your love. I'm just going to try to survive. You know, like that moment to me felt very particular to somebody who has a core sense of self that would be very hard to develop if you have been abused as the default your whole upbringing.
Yeah, I think that's very smart. That's a good point. I don't have anything else to add to that other than great point.
I had a question though. I felt like book one was leaving a little bit of a door open. Maybe it was just my own hope, but it was leaving a little bit of a door open to find out that Jija actually did not kill the little boy.
Because it was off screen.
You know, Essen comes home. What's happened? She puts the clues together. Oh, my husband must have done this. Like, it was leaving a little bit of a door open. And to me, I felt like it was almost leading the reader to the conclusion that they were about to have like a surprise. Were either of you surprised reading the second book to realize like, oh no, like it happened exactly like Essen thought?
Ryan?
Surprised? Not really. I do remember feeling that same thought of like, well, it's entirely possible that we're going to get to book 3 and the son's going to come back around and be the one, you know, somehow this is going to roll back around, or it's Gigi is going to be turned out to be the good guy, and
right.
that, you know, something else happened. But
right.
I'm okay with it. I don't feel like it's a wasted Chekhov's gun or anything.
No.
But
I just don't think she's that kind of author.
Mm-hmm.
If this were the Broken Earth trilogy as written by Brent Weeks, we would have had 8,000 rugs pulled out from under our feet by now, right? And this would be one of them. Like, oh, he either didn't kill him or
it was somebody else.
Right.
You know,
right.
like I kept thinking maybe somebody else killed the little boy and killed the dad, or like kidnapped both the dad and the daughter. You know, like I was like, somehow we're going to be reassured that a father would never do this to their child, even if they are like part of this, you know, dismissed and hated cast. It would never happen. Like but again, Jemesin's not that kind of writer either, who's going to be like, no, things are better than you think. Exactly.
No, that's what I was going to say. Is in the hands of somebody else, maybe I would have expected kind of that typical twist. Mm-hmm. But from what I read in the first book and, you know, now in this book, it's like, she's, this is, I don't know. Do we call this book cynical? Do we call it pessimistic? Do you know what I mean?
Disillusioned, I think.
Disillusioned? Okay.
Something. I don't know. I hate when people are like, I'm not a pessimist, I'm a realist. Like, but there's a part of me that wants to be like, this isn't pessimistic. It's just like a realistic, I mean, for a fantasy novel, it's a realistic depiction of social systems and interactions and human psychology. I don't feel like worse about the world after reading this book, but I don't think there's any sort of like hopeful veil over
arc.
anything.
Yeah. No, I agree. An author's responsibility is to tell the truth as they see it. Mm. And the way that she's writing this book, I have absolutely no doubt that is what she's doing. She is telling me the truth as she sees it. Mm-hmm. And, you know, if she and I ever get to break bread together, which I would love, then I would try to relate the truth as I see it, you know, and we'd argue about that back and forth, right? But anyway, so I feel like she's accomplishing her purpose, at least in that, right? So, Ryan, you look like you got thoughts.
I'm just piecing together my feelings on whether or not I feel the book is cynical or pessimistic or anything. I do like the idea that it feels as this is a very real response to the way that things are happening in the story. But we do have characters who are cynical and who are those. And so I feel like...
Did somebody say Alabaster, or was that just me?
Yeah, we should get to him and his decisions in this book, because we weren't happy with him in the last one.
Well, I wasn't, and Kiptan remembers that. And we'll get there.
But that's the thing. Like the tone of the book is set heavily by the perspectives in which we sit, and so there is a tone of cynicism to it because of the way that Essun views things. But when you get into Nasun's view, Nasun isn't cynical; she's survivalist.
Mm-hmm.
But none of them are happy-go-lucky things that we're miring ourselves in. You know, we're not.
Right.
You know that. So I think that's why the book might have that heavier feel to it, but doesn't mean there's not moments of hope in there, because I do think that Alabaster sacrificing himself at the end of this, not at the exact end, but Alabaster sacrificing himself to save Essun and to save everybody else and to stop Essun from doing what she was doing is a sign of someone who changed and grew in the process. Because I think, I do think that he grew and changed over this book more so than maybe any of the other characters.
And by grew, you mean the opposite, right?
Yes. Slowly
being
eaten
turned
away
to stone and eaten by his companion Stone Eater.
Yeah.
So let's talk about Alabaster a little bit. This is again Kiptan, who asked a question specifically for me, but please let's open up the floor on this one. Kiptan wants to single me out. I'll show him. He says, given that we now know that Alabaster wasn't necessarily trying to end humanity, how do you view his action of creating the rift? Is it at least mildly better, knowing that he wanted to destroy the Sanzid imperial culture prior to ending the cycle of the seasons, and that the rift was created as an energy source to catch the moon? Which is dope, by the way. I just love we're left with the pseudo cliffhanger. Have you ever heard of the moon in book one? And I just thought that didn't work for me. But now that we actually get some of this, some explanation behind the mythology, I think it's really cool. So sorry, that's one of my moments that Sarah was talking to me about earlier about what was it, the Chris Farley sketch?
Yeah.
That was awesome.
Do you remember that scene where you blew up the car? That was pretty cool.
That was awesome. Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, I love the whole moon thing now. That's great. Okay, now as far as Alabaster's decision, I retain my earlier dislike of his methods. So the idea here that Kiptan is getting at is that he wanted to destroy the Sanzid imperial culture prior to ending the cycle of the seasons. Okay, so do I understand it? Sure. Did he just sink how many millions of people into a rift in the earth in a horrible, grisly death? In the fiery bowels of the earth's mantle, or I don't know, however far down it went. No, I do not. I do not think better of him for it. Do I understand it a little bit better? Yes, I do. Could he have opened the rift anywhere? I guess this is the whole thing. This gets into my whole spiel about revolutionary attitudes from the last one. And again, I'm happy to be alone out on an island on this. But no, I don't think it's. I don't think killing millions and millions of people to dismantle whatever system you find oppressive to be worthwhile. Change the culture, find some way to do it, but to kill millions and millions of unwitting people, no, pass. So.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Any thoughts on that atomic bombs? Dropping atomic bombs, killing thousands, millions of people, completely changing, not even just people who died, but people who survived but were so hurt, just because they lived under a regime that you had a problem with and that was causing harm. Like, would you say, don't do that? Like, change the system another way. Don't hurt innocent people.
Right. Yeah, no, that's a great point. My response to that would be it's a category error. I don't have very strong feelings one way or the other about what should have been done with the atomic bomb, during World War II. But I will say it was during World War II. The two nations at war, and this decision was made in order to end the war. There isn't that same kind of declared war situation. This guy just walks in, people are living their lives, and he wipes them all out. So I think it's an interesting point. It's an interesting parallel, but not quite right.
I guess I just don't know what difference it makes to people who are living in Japan or if it had been people who are living in the US and there, had been a bomb from Russia during the Cold War, whatever. Like, they didn't declare war. They didn't decide, I am going to live in a country during a war.
Right.
Any more than the people in this book decided, I am going to live in a post-apocalyptic world where we have really weird seasons every 100 years, Anyway, not to get too controversial, but
no. I think
as
that's
you
a
were
great
explaining
point.
it, like the atomic bomb thing just came to mind, and it's a horrible, horrible thing that regardless of your opinions again on should have, shouldn't have happened, justified, not justified. Like, it was a horrible thing for untold numbers of people, and maybe that's like a fitting analogy for what happens in the books.
Right. Yeah. I don't know. Ryan, thoughts, feelings? Do you dare?
Let's talk about atomic bombs.
I switched it over to him and watched him go, oh no, oh boy.
Not me.
No, I will say that I do have a little more, forgiveness isn't the right word, but tolerance maybe of Alabaster knowing this. Again, very similar in what you said. Like, I understand it better? I don't like that millions of people were killed. I don't like that it was done on the will of one man, but I'm a little more tolerant of it.
This is kind of the opposite of the democracy isn't so sacred point, where it's like, but maybe a few people could have voted on, destroying the earth. Maybe ask somebody else.
There's a really easy out on this, and I don't remember it being there where it's, no, I had to do that because that's where the power is. Because he does talk about this as a power source to catch the moon. And I don't remember anything saying that that was the only place where it existed. Because that's the easy out to say, oh no, he had to do it because that's where the magic crystal full of atomic power that he's going to tap into to catch the moon as it flies by.
I could see that being the case if it has something to do with... so Humanus was where the fulcrum was, and there was one of those sockets there, right? So maybe there is something to that. Like it had to be here because it had to be, the socket had to be the epicenter. So maybe there's some practical explanation. And in that case, if that is the case, I could find it a little bit more forgivable, where it's like, look, this situation with the fifth seasons, every time the moon whips by and it devastates the earth, we've got to stop this somehow. And,
we've got to make sacrifices now in order to save people.
Similar to your atomic bomb thing, the idea is, this is horrific and thousands or millions of people will die, but we have to do this in order to forego more death and destruction and, the wiping out of civilization every few hundred years or whatever. So I could, in that case, find it a little bit more palatable, perhaps. But yeah, I don't remember that being the case. What was I going to say? Ryan, you look like you have something else while I'm trying to recapture my train of thought, like, some runaway cowboy.
There is a lot of this story that, plot line wise, that we haven't really dived into.
Wait, what?
That specifically has to do with the plan.
That's what it was. Thank you for bringing me back. Yeah,
you're welcome.
No, what I was going to say was one of the things that bothers me about what Alabaster did was that he, I was joking about the anti-democratic thing a moment ago, but no, he didn't gather together a bunch of people. It wasn't like, okay, here are our roles in the remaking of the world. I'm going to be the guy who's going to turn to stone because he opens up the Earth's crust, right? And then you're going to be the one who gathers this, and you're going to learn to interact with the obelisks. And, it was just, I guess, way, 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 way too risky. He's like, I'm going to do this, and then maybe
I'll happen to run
somebody-
into the one other origin in the world that I know of
who's capable
who can do the next thing.
Exactly. So yeah, that did bother me. Where it's like,
It's called faith, Craig.
is that what it is?
It's called faith. And I also wonder, I wonder, again, to be honest, like, I really zoned out during all of the plan stuff. Like, okay, there's obelisks and you have to use them in a special way. Like that's just not what grabs me. But I wonder, was there any sort of like deep wisdom from the Stone Eaters that was informing that choice, and to be like, here's what you have to do, and trust me, like things are gonna fall into place later. I don't know. I'm just thinking like the Stone Eaters seem to know a lot of stuff.
And they're very quiet.
They sure are.
They're very quiet about it. To answer your question, is there reassurances from them that, no, this is what you need to do? I don't recall there being a whole lot in there that was like, yeah, Alabaster, this is the right plan. Just trust me on this. I do think that they do enable him and they help him with it, which is a little bit of the nudge that he needs to feel like it's the right direction to go.
Yeah.
But I don't remember that being a big part of it. I think a lot of it falls on the shoulders of the fact that Alabaster knows he's probably the only person in the world who can do what needs to be done. And that does give you a say in how things should go about being done. To a certain extent. Yeah. Like,
so back to what I was just saying a moment ago, he's the only person who can do what needs to be done, but he's also the only person who can then capitalize on what needs to further be done. As far as he knows, he's the only person who can do it. And he's just committed suicide by doing the first thing. So yeah, it just bothered me.
yeah. I don't know. I don't remember how well he knew that it was going to be the end of him. Like there was an awareness of turning to stone and going through the process that he was going to go through, but I don't remember it being like, well, I guess that's the end of that plan. And the other question I have right now, as I think back to it, is Essun, when we first met her, she was like, what, level 4?
Yeah, 4-ringer.
4-ringer, something
it
like
was
that.
Alabaster who gave her her 5th and 6th rings, like on the road, right? Or maybe on the island.
Yeah, it's working. It was working her up. And I'm curious as to, because you guys made the comment, like, the one other person in the entire world who could pull this off. I don't know if it's necessarily that she is a chosen one in that sense, that she is that powerful, or if it's just the process, she's in the right mindset that it allows her to go through the process to get as powerful as Alabaster is, whereas all the other origins have been trained in a different way.
Too fulcrumized.
Yeah, to deal with that. So that for him, it's like, once I find someone that I can train, I can go on with my plan on this. And no, honestly, the plan doesn't make a lot of sense other than catch the moon, use rocks in sky. I'm not going to say that it is the easiest plan to follow by any stretch of the imagination.
That was very artfully said.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. So I'm shocked at how long we've already been talking, and we've got a few more Discord things to get through. So Lady Sweden would like for Sara to respond to the following question. Do you see any influences from Octavia Butler in Jemesin's work? I don't think, Ryan, you and I haven't read any. Yeah, exactly. So
Sorry,
Sara,
that's not a slight at Octavia Butler.
it's a slight against himself for not being well read.
My heathen self.
And neither am I. So Sara, take it away.
So Octavia Butler, I've read 3 of her books. She wrote a number. I have no idea how many books she wrote, but I read Parable of the Talents, Parable of the Sower, which are related. They're in a series. And then I've read Kindred. I think the similarity that I see has to do with like interiority of the characters. And I noticed, in Jemesin's writing and also in Butler's, that you have characters who you get to know very well internally. You're not just sort of observing them from the outside. You're privy to their thoughts and their motivations and their fears and their suspicions and all of that stuff. And you're also getting a real sense of like all the things that they're thinking about and all the steps they go through in deciding what to say and to whom and when. Like there's a real politicalness to the characters, not in the sense of like they're in favor of certain, reforms
Policies,
or whatever, but
yeah.
they think in a strategic way. They weigh out their options. They're pragmatic. And so I noticed that, but I think Butler and Jemesin, they're really, as I've mentioned previously, I'm not really a fantasy reader in general, but Octavia Butler wrote fantasy, so does Jemesin, obviously, and I think they both have an approach to fantasy that makes it somehow more readable for somebody who might not be into fantasy generally. It's just a little more grounded, not so out there. I don't know another way to describe it. Just like easier to follow, more accessible, something like that.
It's interesting you say that, because I find it more difficult to follow what she's doing than some other authors.
Interesting.
It's not impossible or anything, but I listened to a lot of the audiobook on this one because I was trying to get through it pretty quickly, and there were some times where I'd have to go back. I'm like, all right, 5 minutes. I need, what just happened? What's going on? And I found myself doing that a lot more with her than I have with other fantasy authors who may have more names in there, or whatever, may have more world building, although there's plenty of that here. But in her case, I just find her strength, whatever her strength is, it's not the kind that makes it easy for me to follow her story. I don't know, Ryan?
No, I'm in a similar vein. The way I've been trying to piece together a visual to compare it. And right now what's coming to my mind is her fantasy has a more realistic weight to it. The way that I view for example, like the Lord of the Rings movies, they're fantasy, but there's no like sparkles floating behind a fairy. There's no bright coloration. That's a lot of fantasy kind of enjoys being in that bright color, being in that side of fantasy. Whereas the Lord of the Rings films sat more in the realism of what we connect to, but it's still considered fantasy. It's still that situation. And that's how I feel about Jemesin's work, is that it's more akin to that styling. What if
I put it this way? In even the best, in most serious fantasy, award-winning fantasy, there is a temptation to almost wink and nod at the reader and or remind them that they're reading fantasy. Like you said, bright colors, or, just overly fantastic situations or magic systems or whatever the case may be.
Don't forget, this isn't Earth.
Right. Whereas Jemesin never even comes close to apologizing for writing a fantasy book. I don't know if that makes any sense, but maybe that's kind of what you're getting at.
Yeah.
It makes sense in my head anyway. So that's good enough for me. All right, let's go on to, let's do another one from Lady Sweden, because this one actually, I was reading these questions to Sarah before we started, and this one got a good reaction out of her. Lady Sweden says, reading this book, I personally was very annoyed about why Alabaster was so slow to tell Essen about important things during the education part of their relationship in this book. Is this something you shared? Can you see any reason for it? And I read this to you, Sarah, and you were like, yes, why can't they just talk to each other?
I went like, a very exaggerated thing. Like, I absolutely found it annoying, but I'm glad that you read that question to me beforehand, because it gave me time to kind of sit with it. And it's like, at this point, I feel like, yes, it was so annoying. And I'm also so satisfied with Jemesin's decision to write it that way, because it makes sense. Like, it makes sense for who they are as people. It makes sense for this world, that it's hard for these are two people who came together through like forced breeding as part of a weird enslaved caste. Like, they their history together, and that's just the beginning. We can rehash the entire first novel. Their history together is such that like they share a bond, but they also like don't really know if they can trust each other. They don't like each other that much. Like it's hard to talk to somebody about things that you don't even necessarily have language for. Like it's only recently that Alabaster has figured out like, oh, I call this other thing magic. Like it's not something that he's practiced talking to anybody about. And so for him to have to figure out how to talk about it in such pain with this person who he kind of like both deeply values and hates, like of course their communication is going to be really awful. And also Essen's just like not a great communicator.
No, well, that's true. She does something, Jemesin does something really interesting with Essen specifically, and in this book, and that is to put her in situations where she recognizes, and we as readers recognize her acting out what happened to her before. So we saw that with the way that she educated Nasun in her childhood, breaking her hand and, teaching her about the rings and lifting rocks and, whatever Jedi stuff they were doing I don't know, in the woods. And then she is acting out what was done to her in her childhood. And she does a similar thing with Alabaster when she's frustrated because Alabaster isn't just telling her, tell me what I need to know. And then she catches herself doing the exact same thing to other people who she's trying to teach, where she says something along the lines of, oh, maybe this is what Alabaster was doing. He was giving me what he thought I was ready for, what he knew I was ready for, and held back what he knew I couldn't do anything with at the time. And I think this is actually really clever on Jemesin's part, because this is it's kind of a trope at this point. I mean, we talked about it on our Wheel of Time episodes years ago, where it's like, if people actually communicated, the story would have been over halfway through book one.
Yeah.
We're done. You pool your resources, communicate a little bit, poof, no more Dark One. But everybody's too prideful or whatever. Basically, we need more story and we need more conflict. So I'm just going to have them not tell each other things. It's an easy way to create conflict. But she does that and then kind of like shines a little light on that, and is a little bit more clever about it and kind of shows you as a reader why it's actually, like you said, Sarah, believable that these people aren't communicating as well as maybe we want them to, right?
Yeah.
So, anyway, Ryan, any other thoughts on this one?
It's just interesting, having been in a similar situation myself, where as soon as you learn something that you feel like you should, like, why didn't you just tell me that? And having to teach on the other end and trying to give people exactly what they need in terms of, this is what you're ready for. Everyone wants the knowledge to be a buffet. They want it all, especially nowadays. They want all the information right there available so that they can sample it when they're ready, not realizing that you have to build up to it. And so I actually, they are very poor communicators, but I understand exactly why on both sides of it, why it's frustrating and why you go that route. So.
Yeah. Well, good. We've got a few more minutes. We're running up on our time now, and we have a few more comments, but I suspect a couple of these would actually save pretty well to book 3, so I'll skip a couple of them. Sorry, Kiptan. But I do want to get to a couple more from Mirlia and Chesky. The first one from Mirlia, kind of on this subject or adjacent to it. When you consider how Essen was brought up, or how Essen brought up Nasun with the same level of brutality that Schaffa had used back when Essen was Damaya. Oh boy, this is confusing.
Okay, start again.
All right, hang in there. Ready? Here we go.
Yeah.
When you consider how Essen brought up Nasun with the same level of brutality that Schaffa had used back when Essen was Damaya.
Got it.
Always doing it because he loved her, quote unquote, because he loved her. How did you feel when Nasun ended up under new Schaffa's guidance in his school? That was a great moment when there's this kind of ghostly figure running through the woods, saving her and Jija, and it turns out to be Schaffa. Oh my gosh, your mind is blown. It's a great little moment. But this does actually get to, I want to say it was Kiptan who was also asking something about the antagonist, how we feel about him as an antagonist in this book. And I just don't... I didn't see him as an antagonist anymore. I still have those leftover feelings from book one, so it's hard for me to trust him and his motivations. And I don't know what this whole like... what's the name of the book with the shadow that is chasing the kid?
The shadow that's chasing the kid.
Shoot.
Unfortunately, doesn't narrow it down so much.
We just read it, and for some reason, you know how it is when something flees your mind. Earthsea, Wizard of Earthsea.
Okay.
Oh, jeez, I couldn't come up with the name. Okay, all right. Wizard of Earthsea. That's what it was. It was the Wizard of Earthsea. I couldn't.
I'm so impressed at how quickly you remembered that, honestly.
Get out of here. Get out of here. Anyway, what was I even saying? What was I?
You were talking about Schaffa and as an antagonist, and you didn't necessarily
no. That's so there's something like living in his neck, right? Or whatever device or
it's like
stone or something. Yeah, he's got his little devil in there. And so that's one of the questions I was talking about in my pseudo recap of the book. There are a lot of questions to answer in book 3. What is going on with Schaffa? Because at the beginning of the book, he's like the prologue, right? He survives, and then he's infected with Satan, because that's how they talk about Satan. He's infected with Satan, and then through the rest of the book, he's a much better person, seemingly, than he was in book 1, or at least more aware. Or at least that's how I perceived it. I don't know. Am I off base here, Ryan?
No, not really. I wouldn't say that I don't think he was infected with Satan, but he does surrender himself to the great powerful force that allows and it saves him. But it doesn't necessarily. There's nothing afterwards that says that it resides, or like I don't remember it like him having flare-ups or rashes or anything that appear from having this in him. So it was there, and that is something to be aware of. But I don't remember it being. The key thing was that this power overtook him, and it wiped his memory.
Okay, yeah, because he was without oxygen, there was brain damage, and so something was going on. I can't remember everything. Anyway, point being, he is not the same Schaffa that or it doesn't seem to be, to me, the same Schaffa that we knew in book 1.
But you're waiting for that shoe to drop.
Yeah, I still don't trust him, but he sure does seem to be treating Nasun a lot better than he treated Demaya and all the other people that he interacted with in book 1, right? So yeah, how do we feel about her ending up with him? Other than, hey, there he is again, dope moment, great.
I had a very different experience of Schaffa, it sounds like. I was so scared of him. This whole book, I found him sinister, and I don't know that I have ever had an experience with a villain, and I would think of him as a villain and an antagonist. I don't think I've ever had an experience reading a book where I myself felt scared of the antagonist. Not just like I could understand the characters feeling scared, but I myself felt scared of him.
So what, and a serious question, because I might have just missed some things when did he do anything in this book that was, okay, Ryan, what was it? What made him an antagonist in this book?
I would say it's along those lines of, he still killed people. He
killed that fisherman and his entire family.
Well,
for no clear reason.
And that's him. He's lost his memories. He has these powers. He doesn't understand them anymore because he's lost his memory of having them. I don't necessarily feel like that was him. That felt more like the devil in his neck than like Schaffa Unleashed or something.
Yeah, but that's kind of the point in why he works as an antagonist in this it is the dread that you feel of waiting for the shoe to drop, for his memories to return, or for him to go back to doing that, because he's still naturally doing things that are destructive to other people.
Yeah.
It's still part of who he is, and it's part of his coding. So you're just waiting for it to come back. And that's honestly one of the big questions, not just in this book, but as it goes forward into book 3, you have to wonder, who is the final version of Schaffa going to be? What is he going to do?
Yeah.
Is this going to be the redemption story of he starts out as the bad guy, goes through here, we're waiting for the shoe to drop, he gets his memories back, and then at the end decides, I'm not going to be that person because everything I've learned in the middle? Or is it, oh yeah, I am the bad guy, and I'm going to be a better bad guy?
I am the one who knocks, or some moment like that. Back to the question here from Mirlia, how do we feel about Nasen ending up under New Schaffa's guidance? I think it's a great story point, and I'm not saying that I think that Schaffa is a great person now and isn't potentially a bad guy. I just didn't see anything in this story that made me be like, okay, he's got to go. There seems to be hope for him, fighting against all this pain and evil and whatnot. But I still, like you said, Ryan, I don't trust this guy. And at some point, something's going to happen and he's going to regress or turn or something.
Well, what it sets up, Nasun ending up with Schaffa is a huge setup for closing this out, because it's all driving towards the original mother-daughter reconnecting moment.
Ooh, what's it going to be? Is it going to be we're reconnecting, or are they going to be on opposite sides? Because I'm more interested in the fact that she is now under the wing of who she calls Silver, the other Stone Eater. The
Steel?
Steel, sorry. Silver, yeah. Silver is the magic. Steel, she calls him Steel. Sorry, good call. So he's the antagonist as far as I can tell, and is setting her up to oppose Essen in book 3, and there's going to be some showdown. That's kind of how I feel like it's going. There's my prediction. So we had
that's
a prediction.
kind of what I was going to drive us eventually to. So what are your big money down predictions for book 3? So.
Yeah, that's kind of the only one I've got. I don't know. I guess maybe the ultimate. Oh gosh, we're running way over. But maybe the ultimate question here is, or the ultimate prediction is. And Ryan, you don't count because you've read book 3.
Yep.
Will the Earth survive? Is Jemesin the kind of author who will, have her characters figure out a way to stop the cycles and save everything and, whatever, happily ever after? Well, okay, probably not that. But, or is she the type who says, you know what, and then they tried their absolute best and failed, and they brought the moon crashing down into the earth, Majora's Mask style, and everyone died. I don't know. Sarah, what do you think? Prediction?
I don't know. I'm not really a reader who thinks ahead and predicts. I would...
What do you want? What do you want?
I want there to be... I'm still thinking about Schaffa. I want there to be some sort of really satisfying resolution re-Schaffa. I would love for the mother-daughter healing to take place in some fashion. And I would bet that the Earth will survive, but I don't know if any of our characters will.
Okay.
So
I could see it.
If I had to make a guess and put a small amount of money down on it, then that would be it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm going to go with, you know what? That's actually a good place to leave this. So, Český Kurza, I'm sorry, and I think I said your name right. I'm sorry. I will answer you on Discord. We will answer you on Discord about the viewpoints and how well things worked or didn't work. I think we did 2 episodes for the first book. I'm not sure that we have enough for a second episode on this, but here's what we'll do. We'll do book 3, and then if we need a mop-up episode, we'll do that. Sound good? So this is about, the viewpoints. In book 1, there was a lot to be made of the structure, of the different points of view, all of Essen, basically, and different points of her life and how she set it up. And book 2 just didn't do that, right? So yeah, there are things to talk about, but I assume that we'll be able to talk about that as well with book 3, and how books 2 and 3 differ from 1 and all that. So we will get to that. Ryan, do you feel like we're gonna need an extra episode after we're done with book 3?
There's a good chance. I'm thinking that we'll probably need a a mop-up episode. If nothing else, there's just a lot of things that all of a sudden take place in book 3. We're just going to need a lot of time on book 3 at least.
So what you're saying is that things happen in book 3.
Oh, yes. Things happen and things are clarified.
Yeah. All right, good. Well, we will adjourn here for today because we're already over our time, and we're not the blue team, okay? So we don't go for 90 plus minutes. Sorry, everybody.
Maybe the blue team will have me.
Yeah, you'd like that, wouldn't you?
If I could keep talking.
Well,
I'm a pretty talkative lady.
We are going to be back for book 3. But for today, thank you, everybody, for listening. And you may commence yelling at your radios or iPhones or whatever.
Radios.
Yeah, sure. Your car stereo. Fine. Radio, whatever. Your stereo. Yes, that we didn't get to the thing that you wanted us to get to. I'm sure we left a lot on the table, but we will be back. We'll talk about book 3. We'll probably end up doing a mop-up episode, and so you can submit questions again for that. We'd love to have them. But for now, go to thelegendarium.com, go to patreon.com/legendarium, and support the show. And yeah, we'll see you next time.